Spotlight, lectures and performances on and around Albany State University.
Shaykh Muhammad Mendes. Muhammad Mendes was born in the United States and raised in both the U.S. and Nigeria. At the age of 17, he embraced Islam after a life-changing journey to Israel. While at Morehouse College and later at Ohio State University, he pursued a BA in Arabic and began studying the classical sciences of Islam with scholars from various countries around the world. Upon graduation, he traveled to the Middle East and West Africa to sit at the feet of a number of notable scholars who further acquainted him with the major Islamic sciences of Quranic recitation, prophetic narrations, classical Arabic, theology, jurisprudence, and the purification of the soul. And today, his lecture will cover African Muslims enslaved in the Americas. Please welcome Shaykh Muhammad Mendes.
I begin seeking the blessings in the name of God, the merciful and compassionate. Peace be upon you. Assalamu alaikum. How are you doing? How's everybody doing? Thank you for coming. First and foremost, I'm not the sheikh. A sheikh means an old man with gray hair. That's what it originally meant, but it's come to mean a scholar of the highest caliber. And one of my teachers taught us that a true sheikh is someone who's mastered 70 different disciplines. 70 different disciplines. That's like having at least a master's degree in 70 different subjects, which is an incredible accomplishment. I'm very happy to be here at Albany State. I was pleasantly surprised to discover it's a historically black college and university. I went to Morehouse for a couple of years back in 1993, and it's just an honor to be here. We need to support and make sure that our historically black colleges and universities have longevity, and we build on the foundation that was built for us. Today, we're going to discuss the connections between African people on the continent of Africa, as well as African Americans and the Arabic language. African Americans and Africans have a long and intimate relationship with the Arabic language. In fact, Africans, and at one time African Americans, saw Arabic as their language. They saw it as one of their languages. And they did not see Arabic as something that was foreign, something that was strange, that was just spoken by people from certain countries. They saw it as their own. So today we're going to take a journey down this road. I'm asking that, I think you will have questions or comments you want to make. I'm asking that you hold those for the last 20 minutes of the lecture. Just write them down if you think you might forget them. We'll take a break at around 1:30 to take any questions and answers that you might have. Connecting dots, Africa, Arabic, and African Americans. First, what does this look like to you? What does that look like?
A pyramid.
Pyramid? Right. That's a mosque. In Arabic, it's called a masjid. And you'll see another picture. This is a masjid in Mali that was recently in the news because of the manuscripts that were about to be destroyed by extremist Muslim groups that were invading Timbuktu. The Africans, wherever they went, and you'll see this structure in East Africa, especially in Sudan, and you'll also see it in places like Mali, in places like Burkina Faso. The Africans took the pyramidal structure with them wherever they went. It was used in Egypt to build tombs for pharaohs. That's what most of us know it as. You actually find more pyramids in Sudan, the country of Sudan, than you find in Egypt, even though they're smaller. They're smaller in Sudan, but there's actually more pyramids in Sudan than there are Egypt. The pyramid is the most stable structure in architecture, a three-dimensional structure. The Africans would build their mosques. They would also build grave sites, mausoleums in this structure. The other side of this screen, this slide, is a picture, is in Arabic. It's a letter. This is a letter. Does this look familiar to anybody? Anyone? This is one of the most important documents in Arabic as it relates to African people. And it was the letter that Prophet Muhammad, God bless him and grant him peace, had written. Because he didn't read or write. That's why his miracle is a book, the Quran. According to Muslim belief, he had this letter written and sent to the emperor of Abyssinia during his time. This is the original message to the black man, as we like to say. The original message to the black man. It was written in Arabic, and we're going to look at the contents of that letter later. It's very unique. This is another mosque. This is African Islamic architecture. This is another mosque. This is the great University of Sankore in Timbuktu. This was one of the Harvards of its time. Its heyday, its golden age was the 15th and 16th century. Quranic sciences were taught there. Prophetic sciences of tradition were taught there. The sayings of Prophet Muhammad were taught there. God bless him and grant him peace. It was also a place where they studied Islamic law. Islamic law covers everything from how to pray to marriage and divorce law, civil law, positive law, criminal law. It covers everything that includes inheritance and business transactions. All of that was studied in these walls. They also studied astronomy. They also studied science, other sciences, as well as Arabic. And the scholars who taught in this university mosque wrote and spoke in their academic discussions using the Arabic language. And this university was renowned all over the world. Now, the Africans there, they spoke their indigenous languages and they wrote them in Arabic. So they wrote Maninke, Soninke, and other languages like Fulani or Pular in the Arabic language. Very important. So these are other Arabic manuscripts. All the manuscripts that you will see today, these manuscripts, I am part of a network of organizations that collects these manuscripts. Some of them are from the United States, some of them are from East Africa, some from West Africa. And these manuscripts are artifacts that show the spiritual and intellectual legacy that African people, that African American people contributed to human civilization. Most textbooks, most history textbooks, when they comment on Africa, how long is the section on Africa usually?
About 5 days.
Maybe. Yeah, 5 days. And there's a common assumption that you even find among very well-respected academics that Africa and African people have really had nothing of worth or substance to contribute to human knowledge and civilization. And when you start to look at what's in these manuscripts, when you start to read these manuscripts in Arabic or in English translation, you see that that could be nothing further from the truth. So this is one of my teachers. You can't see his face. His name is Mohammed Sharif, Shaykh Muhammad Sharif. He is an African American from Kansas, and he learned Arabic, and he's an artist as well as a historian, and that's his writing. Very beautiful Arabic calligraphy, because this is a part of our heritage. Most African languages were oral. There were some, like the Mende language, that were written. And this idea that the Portuguese, the French, the English brought literacy to Africa is a lie. It's a lie. It's a fallacy. The Africans Many of them were literate people. They wrote the Mende language down. Of course, we all know about the hieroglyphs of Egypt, Medjugorje, and Arabic was one of the primary literary tools that the Africans used. They wrote Arabic using Arabic letters, and they also wrote their ancient African languages using Arabic. We're going to talk about the importance of knowledge of self. This is a poem that was written by a Muslim scholar from Timbuktu about 600 years ago. It was found in the book of a great scholar from Nigeria who passed. I had the blessing to meet him in 1995. I was 20 years old. He was 90 years old or plus. He actually died the next year. His name was Waziri Junaid. And this is a poem that stresses the importance of knowing who you are and knowing your culture. The reason why I'm putting it here is because Arabic is a part of who we are as a people. Whether you're Muslim, whether you're Christian, whether you're Hebrew, whatever your religion is, Arabic is a part of our heritage. And it's a part of the common heritage of humanity. So this is the poem. من لم يخبر أولاده أجداده فقد ضيع ولده وأذى نسله وضر بنجله يوم وفاته ومن لم يعتم بنسبه فقد تحير عقله ومن لم يعبأ بأصله فقد ذهب ذهنه ومن تهاون بمجتهده فقد اشتدت سفاهته ومن لم يدري أسه فقد عظمت حماقته ومن لم يكثرت بأزرنته فقد فسد رأيه ومن جهل أصله فقد علب نهيته ومن لم يدري منفته فقد سقطت حرمته. What does that mean? Whoever does not inform his children of his grandparents has destroyed his child, marred his descendants, and injured his offspring the day he dies. Whoever does not make use of his ancestry has muddled his reason. Whoever is unconcerned with his lineage has lost his mind. Whoever neglects his origin, his stupidity has become critical. Whoever is unaware of his ancestry, his incompetence has become immense. Whoever is ignorant of his roots, his intellect has vanished. And whoever does not know his place of origin, his honor has collapsed. So this stresses the importance of knowing your roots, knowing your ancestry. I was just at the house of a friend of mine whose father-in-law is from Afghanistan. This man showed us a book written by his fifth grandfather in Persian. It was a book of mystical love poetry in Persian. But he knew all about his great-great-great-great-grandfather. And before him and after him. Very important. And you'll find every tradition when you go to Africa and you speak to the griots, or you go to China, or you go to Europe. People all over the world value their heritage and their ancestry, their ancestral land, as well as their ancestral languages. And African people have been speaking Arabic for over 1,000 years. We've been speaking Arabic longer than we've been speaking English or French or Spanish. Over 1,000 years. And one of the books I have up here, Illuminating the Darkness, by Habib Akande, who's a Nigerian scholar who lives in the UK, who lives in England. He documents scores of Africans who were fluent in the Arabic language. So this woman you see here, she's a scholar. She is a sheikh. Right? That is a sheikh. She lives in Dakar, Senegal. She runs a school, a college, for the memorization and the explanation of the Quran. She's the daughter of the great Shaykh Ibrahim Mendes, who, if you were here during the first session, he lived for 75 years. He wrote 75 books. Some of them are up here. and he had 75 children as well. And she's a scholar in her own right. She's respected. That's why you see the young man here coming to her asking for her blessing. She speaks fluent Arabic. There's a beautiful documentary. You can find it on YouTube. It's called Al-Lughat al-Arabiyya fi Senegal, the Arabic language in Senegal. And she's featured in this documentary. And she conducts the documentary done by Al Jazeera. Anyone heard of Al Jazeera News? She conducts the documentary speaking in Arabic. And so she's a great teacher of the Arabic language. She said in that interview that her father made her promise before he died that she would read the entire Quran every 7 days. That means the entire Quran once a week. And she said, I've never broken that promise. Her father died in 1975. And the interview was done like a year or two ago. So she's a very scholarly woman, very devout. Sheikh Anta Diop. Anyone heard of Sheikh Anta Diop? Back in my day, when I was in college, we all knew about Sheikh Anta Diop. Sheikh Anta Diop was a scientist from Senegal. He was also an anthropologist. He studied cultures. And he was a linguist. And his books are extremely important. His books are extremely important for us having an accurate understanding of the place of Africa in human history, as well as its contributions. He's most famous for establishing beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Egyptian civilization was a black civilization. You know how, Cleopatra, they have Elizabeth Taylor, and they have all these people in the Egyptian court who look at the Europeans. Sheikh Anta Diop debunked all of them. So this is from his book, Civilization of Barbarism. But you should get all his books and look him up. He says, for every individual, his or her own cultural identity is a function of that of his or her own people. We know that 3 factors contribute to its formation: an historical factor, a linguistic factor, and a psychological factor. So keep these 3 in mind. A historical factor, linguistic factor, and a psychological factor. Those are the 3 things that you need to have in place to be successful as a community. Whether it's a community at the municipal level, or whether it's at the state level, or national or global, you must have your own distinct historical consciousness. You must have a distinct language, and you must have a distinct psychological paradigm, a religious paradigm that you see the world through. The historical conscience, through the feeling of cohesion that it creates, constitutes the safest and the most solid shield of cultural security for people. The essential thing for people is to rediscover the thread that connects them to their most remote ancestral past. That's the essential thing for every people. In the face of cultural aggression of all sorts, and the face of all disintegrating factors of the outside world, the most efficient cultural weapon with which a people can arm itself is this feeling of historical continuity. So Arabic language and African languages are part of the linguistic factor that's essential for us to develop a sense of who we are, sense of self. And many African languages, going as far back to ancient Egypt, have a relationship with Arabic. I learned this first from my professor at Ohio State, Frederick Cadora. Dr. Cadora showed us how many of the hieroglyphs, like the hieroglyph for house, for the B sound in ancient Egyptian, was a house. And that sound was bet. It's called bet. And then that house, eventually the Egyptians turned it upside down. Right? So if you think of the upside down house, it looks like this. Right? And that became the letter Ba in Arabic. And the word bet, you find it in Hebrew, right? Bet Shalom, bet, most of the synagogues have that word bet at the beginning of them. Bet means house in Hebrew. Beit means house in Arabic. So even going back as far as ancient Egyptian, Medu-Neter, you will find a connection with the Arabic language. Very profound. So you don't have to, as African Americans, we shouldn't think that we have to choose between Medu-Neter and Arabic. Even the Yoruba religion, Ifa, anyone heard of Ifa? Ifa. The religion practiced by Yorubas and a lot of African Americans today is full of Arabic. When you meet someone who's Yoruba and you want to greet them with peace, you want to ask them how they're doing, you say, She alafiani, She alafiani, She alafiani. And in Arabic, if you want to ask someone how their health is, you say, Kayfa al-afiyah. Same word. Afiyah, al-afiyah. And I can go on and on. Swahili, full of Arabic. Swahili is 20 to 30% Arabic. The word for, if you're familiar with Kwanzaa, anyone Kwanzaa? Right? What's intention? Nia. Nia, that's Arabic. Intention. Right? Purpose. Nia. Right? And there's so many other words. Asante sana. Asante sana is from Thana in Arabic, which means praise. I can go to Wolof, I can go to Hausa. African languages are full of Arabic. So when people raise this discussion, you'll see it in the books of some of our elders, like Dr. Henry Clark and Chancellor Williams, Dr. Yusuf bin Yakanan, where there's this disconnect between Arabic and African. There's no disconnect. That's something that's an imagined disconnection. So let's come back to this letter. This is the letter, again, that Prophet Muhammad sent to the Negus, the Emperor of Ethiopia. And we're going to look at the translation of it shortly. This is a quote from Malik Shabazz, Malcolm X. He said, for instance, I love languages. This is from his autobiography. I wish I were an accomplished linguist. I don't know anything more frustrating than to be around people talking something you can't understand. Anyone have that experience? Right. Especially when there are people who look just like you. In Africa, I heard original mother tongues, such as Hausa and Swahili being spoken. And there I was standing like some little boy, waiting for someone to tell me what had been said. I never will forget how ignorant I felt. Aside from the basic African dialects, so that was a given. I'm an African American. I should know some African languages. Now we have our own language here, right? It's called Gullah Geechee. Anyone heard of Gullah Geechee? Right? Anyone know any Gullah words? Right. I'm going to teach you one right now. It means we are one. Anawi, Fawanabi. Anawi, Fawanabi. That means we are one. African Americans used to speak that here, right here in Georgia. And if you ever get a chance, on this Saturday, I'm going to a Gullah Geechee Culture Festival in Riceboro, Georgia. There's going to be ring shouts and food and folklore and all those things. And go to Savannah. There's a brother, he's an attorney by training, but his profession, he's a professional tour guide, Jamal Toure. He gives the tours of Savannah, Georgia, where he shows you all of the Arabic, Islamic, and African history of Savannah. This is right in our backyard. Right here in our backyard. And they have Gola festivals all year. There's one, the one I'm going to is in Riceboro this Saturday. There's one in St. Helena Island. There's one in St. Simon's every year. There's one on Sophomore Island, where they had a community of African Muslims during slavery that lived there, that practiced Islam. They prayed, they called the adhan, they did all those things. They celebrated, they prayed Jumu'ah prayer right on Sophomore Island, which is just a few hours from here. So Malcolm says, I would try to learn Chinese, because it looks as if Chinese will be the most powerful political language in the future. So he could see this already. This is back in the 60s. He said this in 1963, 64. And now China's become an economic powerhouse, which is the prerequisite for becoming a political So Malcolm had deep, deep perception. And already I have begun studying Arabic, which I think is going to be the most powerful spiritual language of the future. And we may not begin to see this, but I think we will see it in our lifetime. Because Arabic uniquely has letters and a vocabulary that speak to, let me put it this way. When I give lectures in Atlanta, I tell people that Arabic is an Afro-Asiatic technology. It's a technology. It's not just a language. It's a technology. And it's a language that gives you a map of reality as it is. The words in Arabic are it's like they're mathematical. I'll give you an example. The word for soul in Arabic is nafs. Nafs, right? The word for precious, something that's precious, nafis. What do you think is the connection there? Yeah, the soul's precious. The word for competition, tanafus. Same root, NFS. What do you think is the connection between tanafus and nafs, between competition and the soul? Huh? Yeah, this human soul loves challenge. And not only that, we love to compete with each other. Right? Especially here in America. Right? We're competing in the classroom, we're competing in the boardroom. Competition is part of what drives human beings. Right? The word for breath is nafas, not nafs, nafas. What's the connection between breath and soul? Yeah, that's how you live. Right? So you see, all these different words have the same root, nun fa sin, nfs, and they all have common connections. And it's like that, if you pick up one of those dictionaries I brought, it's like that throughout the whole alphabet. So each word tells you about the deeper reality of whatever it's describing. And so what the Arabic language allows you to do is connect dots. So there are words that may seem like they have no relation, but if they have the same root, you know that there's a connection there. Very powerful. And Hebrew has the same quality. Sanskrit has the same quality. Amharic is spoken in Abyssinia. And Ge'ez is spoken in Ethiopia. What do they call Abyssinia? Ethiopia has the same quality. In Islamic history, the blacks, the Abyssinians, were known as Habashis. And they were known as As-Sudan. So they had two names for the Africans. Ahbash and As-Sudan. Ahbash is the word for Abyssinia. That's what Abyssinia was called in the classical period. And they're also called As-Sudan, which means the blacks. So these are some things that some Muslim scholars, Arab scholars have said about the Ahbash. The Habashis are famous people whose lineage goes to Ham, the son of Noah. They constitute the majority of humanity, and their land is the largest of lands. So this was written about 500 years ago. 500, 600 years ago. This is how they looked at the Africans. They didn't look at them as a minority. They did not look at them as a minority. They looked at them as a majority. Prophet Muhammad, God bless him, grant him peace, who is not the founder of Islam, as you've seen a lot of your encyclopedias and textbooks, they say Muhammad is the founder of Islam. Muslims don't believe Prophet Muhammad was the founder of Islam 1,400 plus years ago. They believe he was the last prophet of Islam. The first being Adam. Adam and Eve. And then after Adam, there was Noah and Abraham and Moses and Jacob and Jesus Christ. And prophets we don't even know about. If you read the Quran, it says, لِكُلِّ ummatin rasul. To every people, we sent a messenger. Now, usually in the Judeo-Christian paradigm, we look at, what's taught is that the prophets came to the Jews. But the teaching of the Quran is that prophets came to everyone: Chinese, Africans, Europeans, South Americans, Native Americans. He said the caliphate is from the Quraysh, judiciary is from the Ansar, and the invitation and the adhan is from the blacks. Right, so they looked at, now you have people who are in the caliphate who are black, and you have people who are judges who are black. So this is not excluding blacks from judicial appointments or responsibilities or from political rulership. Because some, like Umar ibn al-Khattab, anyone heard of Umar ibn al-Khattab? Umar ibn al-Khattab was the second caliph, the second ruler to rule after Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And he was a Qurayshi. He was from the tribe of Quraysh, and he was black. Right, most Muslims don't know that. And he was black. Ali, who was the fourth caliph, was a Qurayshi, and he was black. In fact, when you read the biographies, the books of biography, the same words that they used to describe Bilal, who's famous as one of the black companions of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. He was also the first mu'adhin, he was the treasurer as well, and a great warrior. He was all of these things. The same words they used to describe Bilal. Shadid, kana adim, shadid al-udma. He was dark, brown, extremely dark. They use that to describe Ali. Same words. Right. And then it's attributed to Prophet Muhammad, God bless him and grant him peace, also said, hold to the blacks, because 3 persons from them are from the masters of the people of paradise. That's a big thing. That's a big thing to say. Luqman the wise, and Najashi and Bilal the caller to prayer. Now we just talked about Bilal. Luqman is a man who was known for his wisdom. Muslim scholars differ over whether he was a prophet or a saint. Whether he was a prophet who received revelation from God or a saint of the highest caliber. They differ. And there's actually a chapter in the Quran called the Chapter of Luqman. And Najashi is the emperor of Ethiopia that we've been talking about. His actual name was Asham ibn Abjar. And this is the letter that Prophet Muhammad sent to him. We should have this letter in our homes. If we don't, we should frame it. Because this was Prophet Muhammad. So we're talking about connections between Arabs, between Arabic, Africans, and African Americans. This is an Arabic document that is from according to Muslim belief, the last prophet of God to humanity, to African people. It's part of our heritage. Let's read it. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, from Muhammad, the Messenger of Allah, to the great Negus of Abyssinia, peace be upon he who follows the guidance. As to what follows, verily, for you I praise Allah, the one whom there's no deity except him, the sole king. Right? He's writing a letter to a king, so one of the first names of God he mentions is the name Al-Malik, the king, right? Because he's the true king. The holy, the source of peace, the protector, the guardian. I bear witness that Jesus, the son of Maryam, Maryam is what Mary is called in the Quran. Jesus, the son of Mary, is the spirit belonging to Allah and his word, which he cast into the chaste and excellent virgin Maryam. She thus became pregnant by means of his spirit and his inspiration with Jesus in the same manner that he created Adam with his hands. Verily, I invite you to Allah, the one who has no partner, and to friendship, meaning sainthood. Friendship with God is sainthood. Continuity and government in obedience to him. I invite you to follow me to have absolute certainty with what I've come with. Verily, I am the messenger of Allah, and I invite you and your government forces to Allah, the mighty, the majestic. Thus I have delivered the message and given you counsel. Therefore, accept my counsel. Peace be upon he who follows the guidance. lots of things in this, and I know I'm breaking one of the cardinal rules of PowerPoint. You're not supposed to have more than, I don't know how many words on PowerPoint, but this is important, right? And you can't summarize this. You can write a whole paper just on this letter. And this letter that Prophet Muhammad wrote to the Negus, to the Najashi, is very different than the letters he wrote to other kings. Like the letter he wrote to the king of Persia was it went something like, this is from Muhammad, the messenger of Allah, Aslim Taslim, surrender to God and you'll be safe. Right. And that king, Kisra, he actually tore the letter. He ripped it up. And when Prophet Muhammad heard about that, he said, may God tear his kingdom up, just as he tore that letter. In a few years, the Romans conquered the Persians. So when a prophet prays, that's it. It's done. So this is the same letter rewritten by my first teacher, Shaykh Muhammad Sharif. Right? So once again, Shaykh Muhammad Sharif is an American. Like I said, he's from Kansas. So he learned how to write this very beautifully. This is an African style of Arabic. And many of your ancestors who were brought here during the Middle Passage, during the Mafa, wrote like this. We wrote like this. And this is the style of writing that we need to revive, we need to preserve, because it's the most ancient style of writing Arabic. There's basically 6 calligraphical styles in Arabic. There's Diwani, there's Thuluth, there's Nasakh. This is called Kufi. This is called Kufi. And it's the oldest. And it's what you still find in Arabic in North and West Africa today. So that king was a Christian. Najashi was a Christian. The Abyssinian Empire was a Christian empire. Prophet Muhammad sent his companions there because they were being persecuted in Mecca. The Arabs in Mecca, most of them fought against Prophet Muhammad, God bless him, great peace, because he was upsetting their business. He was telling people there's only one God, and they had all kinds of gods. They had about 360 idols that people from all around Arabia would come and worship. It was a business. And Islam was bad for business. You're telling people that there's only one God, and not only that, you can't even see him. You can't see him though. But Prophet Muhammad taught us that you don't see him physically. You can see God with the eye of the heart. The eye of the heart. So this king gave asylum, and the Muslims made 2 immigrations to Abyssinia. 2. Prophet Muhammad told them to go to Abyssinia, to go to Africa, for 2 reasons. He said it is a land of truth. It is a land of truth. وَفِيهَا مَلِكٌ لَا يَظْلِمُ أَحَدًا قَطْ. And in it is a king who has never oppressed anyone. That was their reputation. It wasn't like I grew up in Nigeria. We have a reputation for corruption. It's African leadership today. Like Nigeria and Pakistan take turns with who's more corrupt, right? They take turns. Big problem. But this African king was known for his justice. He was known for his integrity. And he protected the companions of Prophet Muhammad during that immigration until they made the big immigration to Medina. So he accepted Islam. He didn't only protect them, but he accepted Islam. He became a Muslim, and he had a very loving, strong relationship with Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. God bless him, great in peace, even though they never actually physically met. And after he accepted Islam, the history of Islam in Africa flourished. And here I have a list for you of different city-states, empires at the top here. These are different city-states and empires that were in Africa, that spoke their own indigenous languages. They spoke Fulani, they spoke Hausa, they spoke Wolof and Lupe and Tiv and Ekwe and all these languages, but the language that united them was Arabic. And if you want to build a great civilization, there must be a common language that unites all of the people in your region, in your land, or in your empire, or in your community. We don't have time to go over all of these, but you see some of them: Timbuktu, Kanu, Harar, which is in Ethiopia. Some call it the Timbuktu of East Africa. Harar, a lot of Hararis in Atlanta, strong community. Darfur, that's been in the news over the past few years, right? Darfur was an empire at one point. It was a great empire. Songhai, Takrur, Mali, Sokoto, and then down here, these are great nation builders and statesmen, rulers, emperors like Nasruddin Malik C, this great scholar, Ibrahim Ba, Askia Muhammad Toure, Mansa Musa, who's known for his famous pilgrimage. He took 1,000 people in his entourage with him. 1,000 people. From Songhai to Mecca, which was it was a journey that took about 6 months to a year through the desert. And they took all this gold because the Songhai Empire was known for all of its gold. And it became Timbuktu was a great commercial center as well as a center of knowledge. And Mansa Musa, Mansa means king, right? Kankan Mansa Musa, he gave away so much gold when he got to Egypt. We were talking about Egypt earlier, that he destabilized the economy of Egypt for 10 years. He just gave gold out to anybody, caused inflation, right? Because there was so much gold in the society now while he was on his way to Mecca. Very generous. Very generous. Can you imagine Obama? Right, like Mansa Musa was making it rain. He made it rain. Right? He made it rain. And then on his way back from Hajj, he sat with the scholars in Egypt, and he brought architects, he brought academics, he brought spiritual guys with him back to Timbuktu. And then we have other scholars here that are mentioned below, Ahmed Baba, and you can read about all these people. You can look about Uthman El Fodio, and many of our ancestors knew about these people. The Africans who were enslaved in the Caribbean, in Jamaica, they had manuscripts written by Uthman El Fodio with them. So this is not history that's far from us. Scholars estimate that 3 to 4 million, actually now they're saying it's more like 10 to 30 million African Muslims were captured and brought to the United States as slaves. These are some of them. We're going to learn about them. Ayub and Suleiman, these are Africans that were enslaved and brought to the United States. Many of them were scholars. Anyone heard of the documentary Prince Among Slaves? Watch that documentary. Hopefully you watch it in your class. Prince Among Slaves came out a few years ago. PBS and Michael Wolff helped to produce it. And it documents the life of an African prince. He was an actual prince. He was the son of the king of Timbo, which is in the Senegambia, West African region, over here. And his name was Abdurrahman. I'm going to show you a picture of him later. But these are all names of Africans that were brought to the United States. There were men and then there were women, like Fatima, the wife of Mohammed Bilali, on Sophomore Island, or just off the coast of Georgia. Saudi Bilali was on St. Simon's Island. And Umar bin Said, he came to Charleston, South Carolina, and when he was freed, no, he didn't, and then later on he escaped and went to North Carolina where he's buried. You can go to his grave today. Yaro Mahmoud, you can go to his grave as well. And these are the different places that they came to when they went to the United States. So I was telling you about Sapelo Island. So this is Sapelo Island. If you go to Savannah, you drive about 45 minutes to Riceboro, and then you take a 10-minute ferry ride to the island. When you walk in the island, you feel like you're in Africa. It's amazing. And Georgia State University is using it for a lot of research. And there's a political struggle going on right now between the original inhabitants of the island and their descendants in in Georgia State University, in Georgia Tech. They want to use the island for research, and there are companies who want to use it, turn it into another Hilton Head. And these people who are descendants of Muhammad bin Ali, many of them, for money, they're selling their land. So it's very sad, because a lot of history is there. This is Ayyub bin Sulaiman, and that is his writing. He was an African brought to the United States. The Africans on the plantations would use Arabic to communicate with each other. It's secret. Because if you were found writing or reading, many times you were either lashed or you were killed. You read the narrative of Frederick Douglass, right? He talks about that. Sneaking to teach himself how to read Arabic, how to read English. Ali bin Sulaiman was enslaved, and his owner saw him writing in Arabic. They thought it was voodoo. They thought he was writing demon symbols. And so he got in trouble, and eventually a British man explained that, no, this is Arabic. This slave of yours is a scholar. So he was freed because of his knowledge. He was freed because of his knowledge of Islam, his knowledge of the world, and his knowledge of Arabic. Okay? And he went on to Britain, where he became a translator at the British Library. This is in the 1800s. This is Amir Abdurrahman, who I spoke to you about. The documentary Prince Among Slaves is about him. It's an amazing documentary. And this is his writing in Arabic. And, he has a fascinating story. He was actually captured while he was on his way back home from a slave raid. So he was a prince and a warrior. And he was enslaving other Africans, probably to sell to Europeans. And on the way back from the slave raid, he gets captured. It's the law of cause and effect. Right? In Arabic, there's a saying, "Kama tudinu tudan." As you treat people, you'll be treated. So Allah humbled this man. God humbled this man and made him he was a prince. He was next in line to be the king. He became a slave. He was brought to Natchez, Mississippi. And on the documentary, they actually, it's at the end of the documentary, they bring all of his descendants together. It's a family reunion. The ones here in America and the ones in Africa. They bring them all together. And you can see the resemblance that they all have. Now, Abdurrahman, in order to get his freedom, they weren't as kind to him as they were to the first picture we saw, Ayyub bin Sulaiman. They said he had to become a Christian. And that if he would become a Christian and do missionary work in Africa, they would pay for him and his wife to go back. Not for his children, they wouldn't pay for his children. So he had to leave all his children in Natchez, Mississippi. He said, sure, no problem. I'll become Christian. So they said, we want you to prove that you're a Christian. He said, no problem. They said, we want you to write the Lord's Prayer in Arabic. He said, no problem. Right? The Lord's Prayer, everyone knows the Lord's Prayer, right? Now, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. So this is the Lord's Prayer that Amir Abdurrahman wrote. Let's read it together. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. Sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim ghayri maghdubi alayhim wad-dallin. Amen. Those of you who are Muslim, have you seen this before? What is this? This is the first chapter of the Quran. It's called Al-Fatiha. And it is the Lord's Prayer, because in Abdurrahman's mind, God revealed this. So he wasn't lying. He wasn't lying. This is the Lord's Prayer. Right? And if you read down here, the missionary wrote, it might not be clear to you, but I'll read what it says. The foregoing copy of the Lord's Prayer was written by Prince Abdurrahman in Arabic at my request. So what freed him? What freed him? His knowledge. In fact, it was the fact that he had more knowledge than the people he was dealing with. And if you want to be free politically, culturally, if you want to be free socioeconomically, spiritually free, you have to have more knowledge than those who seek to control you, those who want to make you fit into their system. So he outsmarted them. And they paid for him to go back to Africa. He went with his wife. He performed his ablutions, his ritual ablutions. He cleansed himself in the Atlantic Ocean. And then he went on and with his wife, and he settled down. He eventually got sick and died. And for those of you who can read Arabic, I just want to point this out. He didn't just write the Fatiha. Look at what he wrote here. Suratun Makkiyah. It's a Meccan surah. And so if you don't appreciate those kind of things, so he didn't just say, this is Fatiha, the first chapter of the Quran. It was revealed in the city of Mecca. And you don't know those things unless you study a little. So these people, many of our ancestors who brought here, were erudite people. They were people who had knowledge of the world. So this idea that we were African booty scratchers, and we came here with no language, no mathematics. The reason why, if you go to Savannah, you'll hear this. You'll see this many places. The reason why they brought the crew from Liberia, the crew people to Savannah, Georgia, was because of their knowledge of how to grow rice. And a lot of history books, there's this idea that the reason why they brought all these Africans was because they didn't get sick and die like the Native Americans. Or because they were strong, right? The Africans were strong. Yes, they were strong. And yes, they were resistant to a lot of the diseases that the Europeans and the Native Americans succumbed to. But even more than that, they brought and they chose specific tribes, specific ethnic groups because of their knowledge. Their knowledge of the stars, like Benjamin Banneker and his people, they were Dogon, right? The Dogon are known for their astronomical knowledge. It's not by accident that Benjamin Banneker wrote an almanac, and then he helped design Washington, D.C. and survey it. It's not by accident. They had deep knowledge that they brought with them from Africa that helped make this country what it is today. This next gentleman you see is Yaro Mahmoud. He lives in the Baltimore area. He's buried there. He used to walk around with prayer beads, they say, like these. These are, this is a bead of 99, a string of beads of 99 beads, because there are 99 names of God that Muslims recite to attain knowledge of the higher self. So these 99 names of God are keys to the higher self of the human being. And he used to walk around with these and recite these names and these prayers. The man over here is Umar ibn Sayyid. He's also called Umar ibn Sa'id. He was another African that lived in the United States. And blacks and whites considered him a saint. They respected him, and they would go spend time with him. This is his writing. He wrote the first Arabic autobiography in America. This is the son of Bilal Muhammad, who lived on Sophomore Island, right here. And then Bilal Muhammad actually wrote a book on Islamic law, known as the Risala, from memory. He wrote a law book from memory. It's at UGA. You can go to Athens, UGA, Athens, and look at it for yourself. This is part of our history. And the Africans who came here, we don't have, the only thing that we have, it indicates the height of their spirituality, the height of their scholarship, are these manuscripts. And I'm like, Makandal was a mystical scholar from West Africa who was enslaved. And according to the oral tradition of Haiti, he allowed himself to be enslaved because he had a vision. Like Denmark Vesey had a vision. He had a vision that he would bring liberation to blacks in the West. He allowed himself to be enslaved. He was brought to the island of Santo Domingo, which later became Haiti and the Dominican Republic, right? Makandal, the reason why we don't know about Makandal, and you will not see him in your history books, is because he initiated the only successful slave uprising in the history of the West. Only one. Nat Turner tried, John Brown tried, Denmark Vesey tried, and many others tried. But Makandal led the only successful one. That's what we don't know about it. And after him, the slave uprising was led by a man named Luqman, who was from Jamaica. They couldn't handle him in Jamaica, so they sent him to Santo Domingo. But Luqman was called the man of the book because he always had a Quran with him. Makandal was a Muslim. All historians, the historians disagree over whether he was a Muslim or not. I believe he was Muslim based on information I have. The transcripts from the trial say that he was constantly saying, La ilaha illallah, that there is no creator except the one God. The historians, they defer over whether or not he was a Muslim, but all historians agree that he was fluent in Arabic. There's no disputing that. So this is part of our heritage. So you had Imam Makandal, and after him was Imam Luqman. Imam Makandal made a prophecy. His prophecy, he said, for the people on the island of Santo Domingo, and not only for them, but for the people in America, in North America, was that a day will come when the Africans rule Haiti, the island of Santo Domingo, and when the Africans rule North America. That was a prophecy he made back in 1754. So we'll see if that prophecy comes true. After Imam Makandal was Imam Luqman, and then after Luqman was Toussaint Louverture. We all know about Toussaint Louverture, right? And then after him was Jean-Jacques Dessalines. And with Jean-Jacques Dessalines, the prophecy of Imam Makandal became true for the island of Santo Domingo, because he was the first president of Haiti. And he chose the name Haiti from the native, the Taino word for the island, Haiti, because they respected the Native Americans. So the history of Arabic with African Americans continued through the Nation of Islam. So the session we had earlier, we talked about the Nation of Islam. Elijah Muhammad brought Arabic into the African American community. That's why most African Americans know how to say Assalamu alaikum. And the 5% Nation of Islam, Malcolm X, Imam Wafdi Muhammad, who's here, they all promoted Arabic as a tool for liberation, a tool of scholarship amongst African Americans. And it's unfortunate that we don't have more black high schools where Arabic is taught. Right? We have French, we have Spanish, right? We might have German, but Arabic, because we don't have a connection to it. We think it's okay, those are the Middle East. We don't understand all the things we've been talking about over the past hour. We need more black colleges and universities where Arabic is taught. I'm so happy that Dr. Tawfiq is teaching Arabic here. Right? Because it's very rare. It's very rare. And Arabic, like I was in closing, like I said to the brothers and sisters in the session before this one, Arabic is one of the United Nations languages. It's right up there with Chinese and French and English and German. It's a United Nations language. And there's a family, I was reading an article about them online. They're a Haitian family. They're not Muslim. They're not Muslim. Their 5-year-old daughter knew 6 of the United Nations languages. 5 years old. The father is a parking lot attendant. The mother is a piano teacher. These are working class people. They're working class. They're not professors, they're not lawyers, doctors, but they decided that they were going to give their daughter the best education possible. So she knows how to play like 5 different instruments, and she does math, and she's 5 years old, but she's doing first grade math, second grade math. And the way they taught her these languages, she speaks Russian, she speaks Arabic, French. She said her favorite language is Russian. They would bring nannies in. So a nanny would come, they'd hire a nanny to spend a day with her, or 2 days, and they would only speak that language to her the whole day. So it wasn't a class, it was just, conversation. So she speaks Arabic too, right? And once again, they're not Muslim, they just understand the importance of Arabic as a political language. The most wealthy, some of the most wealthy countries in the world today are Arabic speaking. The Emirates, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Arabic is spoken by over 200 million people around the world who are native Arabic speakers. And then you have people from China to Pakistan to Malaysia to Nigeria to Senegal who speak Arabic because it's this great spiritual language. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope you learned something new today. And I'm looking forward to your comments or your questions.